When a successful CEO goes undercover in his own store, he discovers disturbing discrimination and unprofessional behavior that shake the very foundation of his business. Ryan Carter, the visionary behind a multi-million-dollar retail empire, decides to disguise himself as an ordinary shopper after hearing repeated complaints about poor customer service and bias in one of his Chicago locations. He wants to see the reality firsthand, not as the boss, but as a regular customer. As he steps into the store, Ryan initially observes that everything seems to be running smoothly. Employees stock shelves, assist customers, and process transactions. However, as he moves through the aisles, he notices a troubling pattern. While some employees are professional and welcoming, others ignore him completely or treat him with open disrespect. At the electronics counter, an employee barely acknowledges him, showing no interest in helping with his purchase. When Ryan asks for product details, the employee responds with rude indifference, dismissing him as if his questions are an inconvenience. Shocked but determined to investigate further, Ryan lingers in the store and overhears two employees making racist assumptions about him, implying that he doesn't look like someone who can afford expensive products. Realizing this isn't an isolated issue, Ryan calls a staff meeting and reveals his true identity. He firmly addresses the lack of respect and professionalism, announcing immediate changes, including bias training, surprise CEO visits, and an anonymous reporting system for employees. This story is a powerful reminder that equality and respect should exist everywhere, especially in business. If you believe in fairness, accountability, and standing against discrimination, like this video and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Ryan Carter, a successful and influential CEO, is known for his sharp and commanding presence in the corporate world. However, on this particular Saturday morning, he deliberately transforms his look, stepping away from his usual polished appearance to blend in as an average customer. His disguise is simple yet effective, stripping away the markers of wealth and power that usually define him. Standing at an above-average height, Ryan has a strong, confident build that suggests years of discipline and leadership. However, today, his posture is more relaxed, his usual upright stance softened to avoid drawing attention. His facial features, sharp and well-defined in a boardroom setting, now appear different under the shadow of his baseball cap. The cap, a dark, worn-out style that contrasts with his normally well-groomed hair, sits low on his forehead, partially hiding his deep-set eyes, which are usually bright with authority but today filled with quiet curiosity. His skin, smooth and well-maintained, reflects the care he puts into his image, but today, he lets the natural lines of stress and contemplation show, making him seem more like an ordinary working man rather than a high-profile executive. His usual impeccable wardrobe of tailored suits, crisp dress shirts, and polished leather shoes is replaced with an unremarkable outfit, a plain hoodie, slightly faded, paired with well-worn jeans and simple sneakers. The hoodie, zipped halfway, reveals a neutral-colored t-shirt underneath, giving him an approachable, almost unassuming look. The fabric of his hoodie is soft from use, suggesting it's been in his closet for years rather than a fresh purchase. His jeans, while well-fitted, lack the designer labels or expensive stitching of his usual attire. They are the kind of jeans that anyone might wear on a weekend errand, comfortable, practical, and intentionally nondescript. His sneakers, a pair of basic running shoes, further complete the illusion of an average shopper. Ryan's hands, usually adorned with an elegant watch and neatly trimmed nails, are now bare. He has purposefully left behind the expensive accessories that would hint at his status. No cufflinks, no tie, no luxury belt, nothing that might give away his identity. Even the way he carries himself has changed. Instead of the firm, decisive stride of a CEO, he walks at a slower, more deliberate pace, mirroring the casual steps of someone browsing a store without urgency. Despite his attempt to blend in, there is still something about Ryan that exudes quiet authority. The intensity in his gaze, the subtle furrowing of his brow, and the way he observes his surroundings with a sharp analytical mind hint at the fact that he is not just any customer. He is a man with a mission, carefully absorbing every detail, every interaction, and every nuance of behavior around him. Though he has shed his corporate armor, Ryan Carter is still a leader at heart. His disguise may have fooled the employees at first glance, but beneath the casual hoodie and baseball cap, the mind of a CEO is still at work, watching, listening, and preparing for what comes next. Ryan Carter had always believed in the power of human connection from the moment he founded his company. He had built it upon a single, unwavering principle: every customer mattered, regardless of their background, financial status, or appearance. His business was never just about selling products, it was about creating an experience where people felt welcomed, respected, and valued. Over the years, his dedication to this mission had turned his one small business into a thriving multi-million-dollar retail empire. But lately, something had changed. Despite his best efforts to instill a culture of respect and customer service excellence, unsettling complaints had started reaching his office. Customers were feeling ignored. Some reported blatant bias and dismissive behavior from employees, while others claimed that certain staff members were prioritizing specific customers over others. Even worse, some employees were described as cold and indifferent, failing to uphold the values Ryan had spent years embedding into his company's DNA. At first, he wanted to believe these were isolated incidents. After all, every business had occasional lapses in customer service, but as the complaints continued to pile up, the whispers became too loud to ignore. Could it be possible that the culture he had worked so hard to create was slowly unraveling? Had his company lost sight of its core values? There was only one way to find out. Ryan wasn't interested in reading reports or listening to filtered accounts from upper management. He needed to experience the reality firsthand. Not as a CEO, but as a regular customer. The only way to uncover the truth was to step into his own store, unnoticed and unrecognized. The store Ryan chose for his undercover visit wasn't just any location, it was one that carried deep sentimental value. Located in a bustling shopping center just outside Chicago, Illinois, this store had been a turning point in his career. Years ago, when his company was still in its early stages, this had been his first major expansion beyond his home city. It had been a risky gamble, the first real test of whether his business could survive outside familiar territory. Opening that store had required everything he had: his energy, his finances, and his trust in his own vision. He had poured his heart into making it a success, and against all odds, it had flourished. In the early days, Ryan had spent countless hours in this store. He personally oversaw the hiring of employees, the training process, and the store's grand opening. He greeted customers himself, listened to their feedback, and even worked shifts on the floor to ensure that everything ran smoothly. Back then, the store had been a shining example of what his company stood for: an environment where everyone was treated with kindness, professionalism, and respect. But now, years later, Ryan hadn't visited this store in a long time. His company had grown too large for him to manage every location directly, and he had entrusted his regional managers to maintain the standards he had set. Still, something bothered him. Despite its sentimental value, this store was no longer the top performer in his chain. It wasn't a flagship location, nor was it bringing in the highest sales. If anything, it had faded into the background while newer, more successful locations took the spotlight. Ryan couldn't help but wonder, had that original warmth and inclusivity remained intact, or had the culture he had once nurtured disappeared over time? Ryan sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, his mind racing with thoughts. He wasn't just nervous about what he might find inside, he was nervous about what it might mean for his entire company. If one store had fallen into bad habits, how many others had as well? If one team had stopped prioritizing customer care, how widespread was the issue? He exhaled deeply, Glancing at his own reflection in the rearview mirror, the man staring back at him was barely recognizable. Not the polished CEO who stood in boardrooms, signing multimillion-dollar deals. Not the confident entrepreneur who had built an empire from the ground up. Today, he was just another customer, an everyday person stepping into his own business as a stranger. Ryan adjusted the brim of his baseball cap, ensuring it cast just enough shadow to hide his more recognizable features. His hoodie and jeans, though simple and casual, felt almost like a disguise. He had spent years wearing tailored suits and designer shoes, a symbol of his corporate success. But today, he needed to strip all of that away. He wasn't looking for VIP treatment, he was looking for the raw, unfiltered truth. A part of him hesitated. What if everything was fine? What if he walked into the store and nothing seemed wrong? What if the issues were exaggerated complaints rather than genuine concerns? But a darker thought crept in. What if the opposite was true? What if he walked inside and found that his worst fears had come to life? What if his company's values had already eroded beyond repair? Ryan took a deep breath. No more guessing. No more assumptions, it was time to see for himself. Opening the car door, Ryan stepped out into the busy parking lot. The air was crisp, the sun casting sharp reflections off the windshields of the surrounding vehicles. He adjusted the strap of his weathered canvas bag, a simple accessory that further distanced him from his usual CEO image. The storefront stood tall before him, its bold logo gleaming under the sunlight. He had spent years building this brand, making sure it represented trust, inclusivity, and fairness. Even now, he felt a surge of pride looking at the store. His vision turned reality. But that pride quickly gave way to focus. He had a mission. As Ryan approached the automatic doors, a wave of anticipation and unease settled over him. This wasn't just another visit. This wasn't about sales reports, performance metrics, or marketing strategies. This was about something much deeper, something personal. The doors slid open with a quiet whoosh, and he stepped inside. Immediately, he was greeted by the familiar hum of retail life. Customers moved through the aisles, carts filled with goods. The scent of freshly stocked merchandise lingered in the air. Children's voices rose in excitement near the toy section, while employees in uniform moved through the store with varying levels of urgency. To the untrained eye, everything seemed normal. But Ryan wasn't here to glance over the surface, he was here to dig deeper. He paused near a display of brightly colored kitchen appliances, taking in his surroundings. His heart pounded slightly faster than usual. This was the moment of truth. Had his company's culture remained intact? Or was he about to uncover a hard truth that would change everything? With one final breath, Ryan stepped forward, ready to find out. Taking a deep breath, Ryan Carter opened his car door and stepped into the bustling parking lot, feeling a mix of anticipation and unease settle over him. This wasn't just another day at work, it was something far more significant. He wasn't walking into a boardroom, a corporate event, or an investors' meeting. Today, he was stepping into his own business, not as the CEO, but as an ordinary customer. For years, Ryan had built his retail empire on the foundation of fairness, inclusivity, and customer satisfaction. He had always emphasized that every customer mattered, no matter their background or appearance. But over the past several months, disturbing reports had started to reach him, complaints of poor customer service, bias, and an overall lack of care from employees. These weren't just a handful of isolated incidents, they were growing in number, signaling that something was deeply wrong. At first, he had tried to rationalize the complaints. Maybe these were just bad days. Maybe customers were exaggerating, but deep down, he knew that ignoring these warnings would be a mistake. If there was even a chance that his company was straying from the values it was built on, he had a responsibility to find out. And that's why he was here. Dressed in a plain hoodie, faded jeans, and an old baseball cap, Ryan had stripped himself of all the signs of wealth and authority, ***, no expensive watch, no polished shoes, just a simple outfit that allowed him to blend into the crowd. Today, he was not Ryan Carter, the CEO. He was just another shopper, an anonymous face in a sea of customers. He glanced at the store in front of him, the store that had once symbolized one of his proudest achievements. The automatic doors gleamed under the morning sun, and the company's logo stood boldly above the entrance. This location wasn't the biggest or most profitable in his chain, but it held a special place in his heart. Years ago, it had been his first major expansion outside his home city. Back then, he had been deeply involved in every aspect of the store, hiring employees, training managers, and even working the floor himself. He had seen it flourish, watched it become a trusted community staple. But now, years later, he wondered, had that sense of warmth and inclusivity remained, or had it faded away? With one last breath, Ryan squared his shoulders and walked toward the entrance. As soon as Ryan stepped through the automatic doors, he was greeted by a familiar blast of cool air conditioning. The store buzzed with energy, ***, the steady hum of conversations, the rhythmic beeping of cash registers, the rustling of carts rolling over polished floors, ***. He took a moment to observe his surroundings. Customers moved through the aisles at a leisurely pace, scanning shelves and picking up products. Parents steered their children away from the toy section, where excited laughter filled the air. Elderly shoppers examined produce, and young professionals browsed electronics. Employees in uniform were scattered throughout the store, some actively engaged in their tasks, others noticeably less so. Near the entrance, a young woman in a striped uniform was enthusiastically helping a customer, pointing out features on a product and answering questions with confidence. Her tone was warm, her body language open and friendly. She embodied exactly the kind of customer service Ryan had envisioned when he started this company. A few aisles away, a stock associate worked quickly, restocking shelves with mechanical efficiency. His movements were sharp and practiced, but he seemed detached, his face void of expression, his posture tense. He was getting the job done, but there was no warmth, no sense of engagement. And then, near the electronics counter, Ryan spotted something else. A young male employee stood leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. Curious, Ryan decided to test the waters. He picked up a pair of wireless headphones and examined them as if considering a purchase. He turned the box over in his hands, waiting, giving the employee a chance to notice him. Nothing. The young man didn't look up from his screen. His fingers scrolled lazily, his body language relaxed, as though he had all the time in the world. Ryan lingered, shifting slightly, making his presence more obvious. Still, no reaction. He cleared his throat. Not loudly, but enough to be heard. Finally, the employee glanced up. His expression was blank, indifferent, no greeting, no welcoming smile, just a quick, uninterested look before his eyes drifted back to his phone. Ryan's stomach tightened. Still keeping his tone friendly, he took a step closer. Hey, can you tell me a little bit about these headphones? Are they good for outdoor use? The employee let out a barely concealed sigh before shrugging. I don't know. Probably. Ryan blinked, taken aback by the lack of enthusiasm. Could you check for me? I just want to be sure before I buy them. The young man grabbed the box, flipped it over half-heartedly, and skimmed the back. He barely took a second to read before pushing it back across the counter. Says here they're weatherproof. No explanation. No additional details. Just a half-effort response that made it clear he had no interest in actually helping. Ryan felt a flicker of frustration. He wasn't expecting VIP treatment, he just wanted the basic level of customer service that any shopper should receive. Still, he decided to press further. Do you know if they're compatible with most devices? He asked. The young man rolled his eyes. Look, man, all the details are right there on the box. You can read it yourself. Ryan inhaled slowly. This wasn't just indifference, this was blatant dismissiveness. A few feet away, he noticed another stark contrast. A white couple stood near the home appliances section, and a different employee, one who had been ignoring him moments earlier, was now enthusiastically assisting them. He smiled, nodded, gestured animatedly toward the products, making recommendations with an energy that had been noticeably absent during Ryan's interaction. The realization hit hard. This wasn't just about bad customer service. This was selective customer service. And it wasn't just a one-time oversight, it was something deeper, something more troubling. Ryan had seen enough. As the electronics employee turned his back and reached for his phone again, Ryan's mind raced. He had expected to find some level of service inconsistency, but this? This was something that threatened the very core of his company's values. And it wasn't going to go unaddressed. Ryan placed the headphones back on the shelf, his grip tightening. His gut told him that this wasn't an isolated problem, this was a cultural issue. His company had grown too big, too fast. Somewhere along the way, the training, the values, and the customer-first mindset had eroded. Employees were now making judgments about which customers were worth their time, and which ones weren't. And now, he had proof. Ryan wasn't angry, he was disappointed. But he wasn't walking away. This wasn't just about fixing one store. Directly. He wanted to test the level of service firsthand. He had already noticed that the young man, leaning lazily against the counter, had barely looked up from his phone when customers entered the section. Unlike some of the other employees he had seen assisting customers with genuine warmth, this young man seemed disinterested, indifferent, and completely unbothered by his job. Ryan picked up a box of Bluetooth speakers from the nearby shelf, holding it carefully. He took a moment to examine the packaging, running his fingers along the edges as if he were truly considering making a purchase. Then, with deliberate movement, he stepped forward and gently placed the box on the counter. This time, the employee finally acknowledged his presence, but only barely. He looked up slowly, his expression flat, his demeanor suggesting that any interaction with a customer was a burden rather than an opportunity to assist. "Can I help you?" the young man asked, his tone devoid of enthusiasm. It wasn't a greeting, it was a formality, spoken as if helping Ryan was the last thing he actually wanted to do. Ryan smiled politely, maintaining a calm, approachable tone. He wanted to see just how far this employee's disinterest would go. "Yeah, I was wondering if these are good for outdoor use." The young man barely glanced at the box before shrugging. "I don't know. Probably." Ryan blinked, momentarily taken aback. The response was dismissive, lazy, and completely unhelpful. He had encountered bad customer service before, but this was different. It wasn't just laziness or apathy, it was an outright lack of care. Still, Ryan wasn't ready to draw conclusions just yet. Maybe the employee was having a bad day. Maybe he simply wasn't trained well enough to answer product questions properly. Trying to give the young man another chance, Ryan kept his tone polite and patient. "Could you check? I just want to be sure before I buy them." The young man let out an exaggerated sigh, making no effort to hide his irritation. Without a word, he grabbed the box, flipped it over, skimmed the back half-heartedly, and then shoved it back toward Ryan. "Says here they're weatherproof," he muttered, offering no further explanation. Ryan could feel frustration rising within him. But rather than reacting emotionally, he decided to push the test further. Okay, Ryan said evenly. And do you know if they're compatible with most devices? The employee rolled his eyes. Look, man, all the details are right there on the box. You can read it yourself. Ryan stared at him for a long moment. This wasn't just indifference or lack of knowledge, it was outright dismissiveness. The young man had no intention of engaging, assisting, or even pretending to be helpful. What made it worse was that Ryan had already seen this same employee enthusiastically assisting other customers just minutes earlier. Near the entrance, he had observed him chatting with a white couple, giving them full attention, making recommendations, and even smiling. But now, standing in front of Ryan, he could barely be bothered to string together a complete sentence. Ryan could feel a heavy silence hanging between them, thick with unspoken tension. Nearby, other customers were being treated with enthusiasm and professionalism, receiving personalized assistance, warm smiles, and genuine recommendations. It was blatantly clear that not all customers were being treated equally. Still trying to remain neutral, Ryan decided to test one more thing. You seem busy, he said, keeping his tone measured. Is there someone else who might be able to help? The young man smirked, his lips curling into a mild, almost mocking amusement. I don't think anyone's free right now, he said dismissively. Then, with a slight shrug, he added, just figure it out, all right? The words hit harder than Ryan expected. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was disappointed. This wasn't just about bad customer service. This was about a pattern of selective behavior, about employees deciding which customers were worth their time and which ones weren't. If this employee was willing to brush him off so casually, how many other customers had walked out of this store feeling the same sting of indifference? Ryan set the speakers back on the shelf, his mind racing. He needed to see more. Ryan took a deep breath and continued through the store, watching carefully. In the clothing section, he encountered a young Latina employee who was folding shirts neatly on a display table. The moment she noticed him, her face lit up with a warm, welcoming smile. Hi there. Let me know if you need any help with sizes or styles, she said cheerfully. Ryan nodded, thanking her, but he lingered for a moment to observe how she interacted with others. A few moments later, an elderly man approached her, struggling to find a certain size. She immediately stopped what she was doing, helped him search through the racks, and even offered to check the back for more options. Ryan watched as she treated this customer with patience, kindness, and genuine effort. It was a stark contrast to what he had just experienced at the electronics counter. Why were some employees going above and beyond, while others treated certain customers with outright indifference? Then, as he made his way toward the home goods section, he overheard a conversation that made his stomach tighten. Two employees, both casually leaning against a shelf, were speaking in hushed tones. That guy over there, one of them said, subtly gesturing in Ryan's direction. Probably just here to browse. People like him never buy anything big. Ryan felt his jaw tighten. The other employee chuckled. Yeah, he doesn't look like he's got the cash for this stuff. Probably just wasting time. Ryan exhaled slowly. They didn't know who he was. To them, he was just another black man walking around their store, and they had already decided, without speaking to him, without knowing anything about him, that he wasn't worth their time. The casual ease of their conversation, the way they dismissed him without a second thought, was a gut punch. This wasn't just about one bad employee. This was a culture problem. Somewhere along the way, the values Ryan had built his company on had started slipping through the cracks. It wasn't just about unprofessional behavior. It was about bias, about employees deciding who deserved good service and who didn't. Ryan took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain composed. He wasn't just going to walk out and forget about this. This wasn't about fixing one store. This was about fixing a much bigger issue. And it started now. As Ryan walked into the clothing section, he immediately noticed a stark contrast in atmosphere. The electronics counter had left him with a sour taste, but here, things felt different. The section was neat and well organized, with stacks of folded shirts arranged by size and color. The lighting was bright, and the area had a welcoming energy that put him somewhat at ease. A young Latina employee, no older than her early 20s, was carefully folding shirts at a display table. Unlike the dismissiveness he had just experienced, she acknowledged him the moment he entered the area. "Let me know if you need any help," she said, offering a warm and genuine smile. Ryan nodded, returning the smile. Her tone was friendly, sincere, and effortless, exactly what he had always envisioned when he built this company. He lingered for a moment, pretending to browse through a rack of polo shirts while keeping her in his periphery. He wasn't just looking at the clothes, he was observing her, watching how she interacted with other customers. A few moments later, an elderly man walked up, clutching a navy blue dress shirt in one hand and glancing around hesitantly. Before he could even ask for help, the young woman noticed his uncertainty and immediately stepped forward. "Hi, sir. Are you looking for something to go with that?" she asked warmly. The man nodded, seeming relieved. "Yeah, I need a tie that matches this shirt. It's for my grandson's wedding, and I'm terrible at picking colors." She grinned and walked over to a nearby display. "I think I've got just the thing. Are you looking for something more classic or something with a little personality?" The man chuckled. "Classic. My wife says I should stick to the basics." Within seconds, she pulled out two carefully selected ties, one a deep burgundy, the other a traditional black. Both of these would go great with that shirt, but if you want a little contrast, the burgundy would add a nice touch. The elderly man took a moment to examine them before nodding in approval. "I like the burgundy. My wife will probably say it's too bold, but I'll take the risk." She laughed. "I think it's a great choice. Let me know if you need anything else." As Ryan watched the interaction, he felt a small flicker of hope. This was the kind of employee he wanted in his company. She wasn't just going through the motions, she cared. She was patient, helpful, and engaged, treating every customer with the same level of respect and enthusiasm. For a brief moment, Ryan felt reassured. Maybe the problem wasn't as widespread as he feared. Maybe the dismissiveness at the electronics counter was just a bad employee, not a reflection of the entire store's culture. But before he could fully embrace that thought, he overheard something that made his stomach tighten. A conversation that exposed a hidden bias. Just a few feet away, two young employees stood casually leaning against a shelf, their arms crossed, speaking in hushed tones. "That guy over there," one of them muttered, jerking his head in Ryan's direction. "Probably just here to browse. People like him never buy anything big." The second employee let out a quiet chuckle. "Yeah," he agreed. "He doesn't look like he's got the cash for this stuff. Probably just wasting time." Ryan felt his jaw tighten. A slow wave of disgust and disappointment settled in his chest. They didn't know who he was. To them, he was just another black man in their store. And in that split-second judgment, they had already decided that he wasn't a real customer. They hadn't even spoken to him. They hadn't seen what he had in his wallet or what he might have been interested in buying. They had simply looked at him and assumed he couldn't afford their products. Ryan inhaled deeply, forcing himself to stay composed. His instinct told him to turn around and call them out right then and there. He wanted to see the look on their faces when he revealed who he was. wanted to watch them squirm as they realized they had just insulted the CEO of the very company that paid their salaries. But he held back. Not yet. There was more he needed to see before he confronted the issue head-on. Without a word, Ryan turned and walked away. Ryan made his way toward the front of the store, still processing what he had just heard. At the checkout, a middle-aged black woman stood behind the register, ringing up customers with an effortless mix of efficiency and warmth. Her name tag read Denise. As Ryan approached, she gave him a genuine smile, her eyes kind. "Did you find everything okay?" she asked, her tone filled with sincerity. For a moment, Ryan hesitated. "Not exactly," he admitted. "But I think I'll hold off for now." Denise's smile faltered slightly, concern flashing in her expression. But instead of pressing him for a reason, she simply nodded. "Well, if you need anything, we're always happy to help." Her genuine warmth was yet another stark contrast to the experiences he had earlier. And that was the problem. It wasn't that every employee had a bad attitude. It wasn't that the entire store was dysfunctional. The issue was inconsistency. Some employees, like the Latina associate in the clothing section and Denise at the register, embodied everything his company was meant to stand for. But others, like the employee at the electronics counter and the two whispering behind the shelves, had completely abandoned those values. And if Ryan hadn't come in disguised as a regular customer, he never would have seen it for himself. As he walked out of the store, he felt a weight settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just a training issue. This was about a culture that had gone unchecked. His company had grown too large, too fast, and in the process, some of the core values he had built it on had been lost. And now, he had proof that bias and dismissiveness were creeping into his own stores. Ryan exhaled slowly, running a hand down his face. This wasn't just disappointing. It was unacceptable. And he was going to fix it. This wasn't just about one store or a few bad employees. It was about ensuring that every employee, in every location, understood exactly what this company stood for. As he stepped into the sunlight, Ryan knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Ryan knew it was time to address the problem directly. He asked to speak with the manager, a man named David Ross. The moment Ryan introduced himself, David's expression shifted from polite professionalism to stunned realization. "Mr. Carter. If I had known you were visiting." Ryan held up a hand. "That's the problem, David. You weren't supposed to know. I came here as a regular customer. And what I experienced today. It wasn't good." In a staff meeting, Ryan recounted what he had seen. He didn't humiliate anyone, but he made it clear, this culture had to change. He announced mandatory bias training, surprise store visits, and an anonymous employee feedback system. "I built this company on the idea that every customer deserves respect. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. But I'm not giving up on it. And I'm counting on all of you to help fix it." Walking out of the store, Ryan felt exhausted, but determined. Change wouldn't happen overnight. But it had to start somewhere. And it would start with him.